Welcome back, everyone. I am thrilled today that I have my friend JB on. Now, you'll hear me say JB, you'll hear me say Jonathan. I don't know. We'll just see which personality comes out today because he's super fun and extremely knowledgeable in the field of dentistry and many other. So let me introduce him to you. Jonathan Bonanno, a leader in RPO solutions for dental service organizations with a decade in healthcare and a forthcoming doctoral degree in industrial organizational psychology. God bless you. What are you, fourth year? Oh, and he's still sane. Well, relatively. Through Chief Psycho, he integrates business strategy with human values via lab methodology, which he has trademarked. Smart man. Jonathan has coached global teams, facilitated multi-million-dollar practice sales, and empowered thousands of professionals. His mission? Empower resilient, high performing healthcare teams. Get inspired as Jonathan reshapes talent management and team dynamics. Please welcome to the show my friend Jonathan. What's up?
What's up, Greg? I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be so much fun.
I'm so excited to have you on. It's been, a long time coming. We've talked about it, and what I love, what I'm just right out of the gate. One of the things that I love about you is that there isn't this rigidity about you where it's like we need to get this scheduled so we can record here. It's just kind of this free flowing. And that is the way of dental today. Everything that I knew about dental, I've been in the industry for about 18 years now, before COVID. Like, just take it, wad it up in a paper, wad that paper up and throw it in the trash can. Would you agree that that's been your experience in healthcare before and after this whole 2020 thing that happened?
Oh, I completely agree. Something that my husband and I always talk about is that dentistry and healthcare, all aspects of it, are still operating in a very inherited model. It has not grown, it has not changed, it has not transitioned from what it once was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And now, with the advancement of technology, utilization of AI, new individuals coming into the space to really shake things up, I think there is so much more innovation to come. But yeah, it's still sticky in some areas, right? And I think there's still opportunities everywhere, no matter what you do, even if you've been pushing the needle super, super hard and heavy, there's always room to improve. And that's why I love dentistry, because what I get to do, I get to find ways to improve the lives of others. So I get to have fun.
Well, and I think as much as the landscape of dentistry has changed, for my lane, the fixed full arch lane, teeth in a day, call it whatever you will, as much as that has evolved, right, since the mid 2000s, right, in the last 20 years, the evolution, right, the first one procedure being done that 40 years ago, I think, if I'm not mistaken, as much as that has evolved and as much as the dental landscape has evolved, right, with the consolidation and, the term DSO coming into existence, I mean, relatively recently, and the acceleration of the consolidation, right, the DSO space, which you live in, and more I become a part of, right, whether it's individual clinics that are, really high producing, the emerging groups doing full arch and trying to compete with some of the very large brand names that most people know about that are in my lane, full arch. As much as that has changed the landscape of dentistry, right? Those coming out of dental school, and the DSO is really an avenue for them to level up their skills. Whereas before it was, you found a privately owned practice and that's what you did, and you became an associate. With all of that change, there's still foundationally similarities. It's really a lot of the same, like you said. And one of the skills that we find as we teach, coach, and train team members is that skill of listening and that active listening piece. What have you found to be one of those core pieces, those core principles that really hasn't changed, especially with the education and the way that you teach and coach and work with teams fundamentally that hasn't changed over the decades?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is heavily inside of big pharma. So I come from the medical side of healthcare. I worked in pharmaceuticals. I worked very heavily with risk evaluation strategy programs. So when I decided to make my shift into dentistry, I came over with not one lick of dental knowledge other than me being somebody that was a neurotic person about teeth. When I meet somebody, the first thing I look at is their smile and then their shoes. Mom always said, never trust somebody with dirty sneakers. So, hey, you learn from that and take it forward. um, but with the consolidation conversations, with the transitions and how those changes are just naturally starting to come and be much more, I would say, invited. And I think that's where the listening has started, right? Because when we're starting to actually pay attention and give this space to somebody else to speak up and share a new idea, now we start having more of that conversation and discussion. Like the DSO discussion when I first came into dentistry, that wasn't a topic that I was aware of. But it was a term that I was familiar, or excuse me, that wasn't a term I was familiar with, but it was a topic I was aware of because it's enterprise in many cases, and it's just global expansion. So that's how I made the connections in that simple context. But when we start going into like the active listening, that's really the foundation from where I started from when I started in my corporate career. I started in my entrepreneurship. That's the foundation of what my lab methodology, is built on. Lab stands for learn, assess, and build. And really the focal point of that is through observation. And I'm somebody that is I would say I'm much more of an extroverted introvert. I am the reserved guy. I used to be the person when I was young, scaling between walls so I wouldn't be seen. And that's actually what brought me into the field of psychology, because I wanted to really understand more about what's going on in the person's psyche and what their being is dealing with. And the only way I can learn that is through listening to them. And I'm not somebody that can have a lot of surface level conversations, mainly because I start running out of questions and I don't want to overstep a boundary sometimes with somebody I just met. And then it turns into me interviewing them or drilling them, right? So having that sense of understanding of knowing when to ask is all coming to the point of listening, right? We're listening to understand, not to respond, listening to engage, not to take over and facilitate.
Yeah, and that is probably one of the most challenging pieces, right? That you closed with there is that not listening to respond. And I love that you also add on the listening to engage, right? Because sometimes there is a response to what somebody's sharing, for sure. So that listening to engage, which is to drive conversation forward or to acknowledge what they're sharing and add to the conversation, not replace with or show that you're right, if you will. But I got to go back to your mama. I got to go back to that comment that your mom said, right? Don't trust anyone with dirty sneakers. And here's one of the pieces, because it really does loop on to some of the changes in dentistry. I can tell you that 15 years ago, the formal side of dentistry, right? If you came to a conference, you wore, as a male, you wore dress shoes, you wore a dress shirt, and you wore a tie and a jacket, right? You wore a suit. That's the way that it was. I was struck at the last DSO conference I was at just last week, and how it's become more and more normalized, and not so much that it's casual, but I can tell you the way that I dress now compared to even 5 years ago, pre-COVID, is much different, and it's well accepted. Even speaking in front of hundreds of clinicians from a main stage and talking about what I know, right? And my experience and others, and sharing my knowledge. It I love it. I love the fact that it doesn't have to be as buttoned up formal, but it can still be professional. And that is one of the pieces that I work with teams on, is being approachable, meeting people where they're at. It doesn't mean roll out there in a pair of Daisy Dukes and a wife beater, right? But it does mean that you do present well, but it doesn't mean that it has to be buttoned up and uncomfortable. And but there's some of the custom suits are just incredible, don't get me wrong. I don't want to put that down as well, but I know I used to cram my foot in a pair of Magnanis, and it really caused problems for my feet, right? Look good, was not good for me health wise, and ended up having foot surgery. I don't want to say because of it, but probably, right? And they were the most comfortable pair of dress shoes I ever owned. They felt good, but just the shape of the shoe, your foot doesn't look that way, type of thing. So I love that you shared that piece of it, right? That is the evolution of dentistry. That is the evolution of business. that it can become more approachable and that we can listen to engage. And so, where have you seen that most prevalent in results of teams that you work with, where teaching them to listen to engage, where it really has flushed out into results based?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love this topic because when we start looking at it, it's we hear the conversation about like perception is reality, right? And in many instances, it's very true because we are at times surface level people and we judge by the cover we see. It's unfortunate, but it's also very true. So when you start thinking about that and we start thinking about like the laid backness, or now we're a little bit more smart casual in our demeanor and our presence, it's not that suit and tie. Well, that same level of interaction translates to the team interaction too. What is the level of comfortability? What is the discussion taking place? I'm a big conduit of psychological safety. So if you're not making that a priority inside of your discussions on a daily basis, and it's simply by saying, are we feeling safe today? How are we feeling? Right? It doesn't have to be this large formalized conversation to where it's like a lecture. But when we start focusing and putting in the components of psychological safety, the biggest thing that starts is inclusion. And inclusion is not just by how we look, it's inclusion of thoughts and ideas. So if we're not willing to share, we're not willing to listen, we're not willing to engage, we're not willing or capable of forwarding any of those conversations. So anytime that I'm coming into a team dynamic or working with a company or practice or whomever the size, I always start with psychological safety because that's the foundation that I have to operate from. And if you don't know what that term is, that's the starting point. Let's make sure that everybody's seen, heard, and respected first. And then let's start looking at what the objective is that we're trying to accomplish. Okay, great. Now we're looking to maybe find a new patient special for our referring patients in practice. Practice that I came from was very, very relationship based. We focused on nurturing our clients. We focused on nurturing our patients, on nurturing our relationships with our referring practices. That's how we built our practice. And the only way that we were able to do that is through listening to one another on our team. We were a small team. I had two hygienists, one associate, and our main provider. I had one other front office team member, and then by the time I was leaving, I had my replacement office manager. And we had a really great team. Oh, and two dental assistants. Really, really great team. We worked in symbiosis of one another. We were able to expect what people were saying or thinking. We were just in kind of that flow. But you don't get in that flow without having conversations. And that all is communication based, it's listening based. It has to be culturally based too. I mean, every morning, if you're not having a morning huddle, as mundane and as standard and as old school as that might sound, it is the way of communicating and staying in communication with your team. Understanding what's coming and what's to be expected allows your team to be out in front for when that happens. So I really love the conversation, the communication channels. I like to have fun with it too. If you've ever played the human knot game, that is a blast to see people completely knotted up. You start seeing the level of frustrations on their face because they're like, no, Jonathan, move that way. No, Greg, you got to go under. Loop your foot over, right? Like you start seeing the characters and the charisma start really coming to surface. And that's where you start seeing the magic happen. You start seeing people having fun and enjoying what they're talking about because they're actually excited to talk about it. How fun and normal is it when we're coming into a new practice that we might just be consulting or just working with, and we know that there's a shift that needs change because everyone's talking about culture, but nobody's really talking about what that culture looks like in the office, in action, in ways of being, in discussions. So I think there's so much of an art and science that comes into the listening aspect of it. And I like to equate it to talk therapy, which is a tool that I kind of keep in my tool belt. You know, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychotherapist in any regards. But inside of my training and education, I have talk therapy understandings and fundamentals. That's a part of my practice and learning. So that's something that I really, really heavily lean into because it's allowing me to just stay apprised of the conversation without forming an opinion, without being biased, and without trying to give you the solution. You know, us as leaders, I think at times we get lost in the swirl of we need to be moving faster and we need to be out in front too of our own decision making process. And that doesn't always work either. So slowing down and speed up to make the right decision at the right time. It all starts with the conversation. It starts with the art and the science of listening.
Yeah, and I so appreciate that you brought up psychological safety because it really gained a lot of momentum, 6, 7, 8 years ago in the workplace. Having the ability to create a safe space, a safe place to bring forward, ideas, questions, concerns, even mistakes, right? Where there wasn't going to be this punishment or even humiliation for speaking up about it. And it's not just in the words, right? That leadership or the culture or the practice or, supervisors, but also in body language, right? And how it's presented. And I know one big piece of that, right? And it's what we really lead with clients that we work with, not just for those doing the lead calls, patient facing, but also with each other, is empathic listening. Because it's so critically important. There's so many elements that are part of it. And I heard you sharing on that, and I've heard you talk about it before, right? So it's being present, right? Not being distracted. Because for me, there's nothing more challenging than working with, speaking with, talking to somebody else, and they're distracted. They're looking down at their phone, they're looking off somewhere else. And I mean, like, a simple distraction, like, a car alarm goes off or something, right? That's natural. It's going to take away our attention. But like for longer than a moment, right? It's almost if, am I boring you? Is this like, am I not keeping your attention? Right? Pieces like that, and getting someone's attention, keeping someone's attention, and then that call in, I call it the call and response, right? I may have grown up in a church background, right? The call and response aspect of paraphrasing, or checking in, like confirming, affirming, is this is what I'm hearing you say, and then going to the listening to engage piece, you know those types of things are so critically important in order to have meaningful engagement, conversations, interactions, which create that space, that atmosphere of it's okay to be here, especially as consultants. And, for my team going in, because whether they good, bad, or indifferent, whatever experience they've had, if any, but it's an outsider coming in, and that, oh no, because for we believe right person, right seat, and let's drive forward. It's everybody getting on the same path toward helping to create a better environment for and better profitability and cash flow, and creating that. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you're not successful in the role you're in. Let's get you the tools and resources, or let's find a better position for you, to be open and teachable. And those are such important pieces to create that safe space for those to be open to that learning. And then if they're not, that's okay. Then they're not, right? And that's okay too. And is that what you're finding in the work that you do with teams?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That is I would say, almost the instantaneous result that we start seeing. People start speaking up. They finally recognize that, oh, I'm not just sharing something that's being heard as a complaint or heard as a request. I'm just sharing what's going on in my world, and I need somebody to be like, got it, hear you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for taking the time to bring me up to speed. Those little moments make waves of an impression on your team. For instance, this was a recent thing that happened to me last week. One of my team members, brilliant, love him. He's great. He is our virtual integrations manager. He's based in Brazil. He is just an amazing individual that I just cannot just speak highly of, because I'm just so proud to have him on my team. And he called me out on a call. And that's something that we enforce. We enforce our team to be like, no, if I'm doing something and it shouldn't be done that way, you let me know, you tell me, hold me accountable just as much as I'm going to hold you accountable. Funny enough, I joined a call, and I wear glasses and I have a monitor on my screen, but I couldn't see what I was looking at. So I was like this, I was squinting. But at the angle that I was squinting and the way that I was looking, and me being on Zoom joining a call, it looked like I was in a completely bad mood. So touching on like the body language thing, just me looking and squinting and trying to figure out what am I looking at created like, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? And that's the chat that I got from him. And he was like, okay, just want to make sure you're smiling, Jonathan. Like when you're joining your call, make sure you have your happy face on. And I'm like, thanks, PJ. I really needed that, because I was in the moment still of what I was fixated on, and I wasn't present for what I was going into at that moment. So it was a gentle reminder that I needed to make sure that I was present and ready for the people that were expecting me to be present for them. So having that reminder myself and then reinforcing that and encouraging that from my team, those same tactics and habits are what we bring forward, because we know it's a mindset shift that's required. And a lot of what we're coming at is information based. So, one, are they ready for that information to be consumed? And two, how are we delivering it to actually be heard and, I guess, accumulated in a way that makes sense for us? And even those simple things can make a huge, huge thing. If your head's down at the front desk and you have a new patient walk in and your head is only down and your head's tied, or your hand is tied to the phone, and you're not acknowledging that a patient's just presented themselves to you, that's a huge issue. We start talking about, oh, okay, well, I just stood at the front desk, stared at their scalp for about 15 minutes, and then I just sat down. And then I got the, you're good type of response. Like, how does that end up showing up within the patient interaction? How does that show up now within the team interaction? Is that being shared amongst other team members? Is that the type of training that's being brought on when you're ready to expand or replace? You know, there's so many other areas that show up that we don't consciously think about all the time. And I think that's the important part about the direction that we're moving into. A lot of the unconscious thinking is becoming conscious. It's becoming a requirement. I mean, look at the Gen Z that's coming in to the workforce. You hurt their feelings, they're not coming back. So it's like, wait a minute, we got to do some emotional regulation and deregulation with some folks here.
Well, and what you're talking about too, because we really focus a lot on that. It's really every touch point of the patient journey when they're coming in. And in fixed full arch, it's either a home run or it's a strikeout. You don't have the opportunity with a new patient to plop them into a hygiene chair, and then maybe they have 3 or 4 treatments that they have upcoming, and maybe you get them for one, and then in the future there's something else that comes up. It's either everything or nothing. It's either a $20, $30, $60,000 procedure, or they say no, not now, or I put up some type of smoke screen, and you don't get them back in the chair because there's 3 other providers within a stone's throw of the office, unless of course they're in a major rural area. But still, they can drive somewhere else and have that done. So everything that you're talking about lands, right? They can do everything for the digital marketing to make that phone ring. They can do everything on the initial inquiry and get them to come in for the consultation and show up. And then at the front desk, the ball could be dropped, or during taking the dental records, it could be dropped, or during the initial greeting with the treatment coordinator, or the doctor-led part of the consult, or fill in the blank. So every touch point, like you talk about, and then it's a matter of being mindful of working with in this multi-generational aspect and respecting not just the Gen Zers that are coming in, which that's a lot of the folks that are doing that lead call, especially in the big cases, but then also those that have 30 years of experience and trying to help them to transition into new with all the tech stack and all of that fill in the blank. So it's really being able to meet our employees where they're at, just like we meet the patients where they're at, just like we meet clients where they're at. And so there's just wide breadth of being, that's why I opened the show by saying, I just love that you are flexible and that you adjust to and adapt to, because it is really representative of who we need to be and how we need to show up in the industry. And it's just such a good example. So I appreciate that. Well, JB, this is the part of the program. All of my guests play a little something called What the Sleuth is Going On? It's 3 rapid fire questions. First thing that comes to mind. Are you ready to play?
I am ready to play.
Okay. Question number 1. What's the worst bad breath you have ever encountered?
Ooh.
And be careful, I know your husband.
Yeah. Mr. Art, sophomore year of high school, AP History, he would be loaded up with coffee every day and have a garlic loaded bagel with something for breakfast. He was my 3rd period teacher for my sophomore year of high school and my junior year of high school of AP History, and that was rancid.
Wow, I don't know. I think this is episode number 70 something on the Two Sleuth podcast. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first time we have name We have an actual name of somebody being
Oh
called.
yeah.
Well done. Good for you. Put it
I have a
out
good
there. All
memory.
right. Well
Halitosis is
done.
not
All
my
right.
friend, and I don't want it
Yeah.
either.
Oh no, I think that a lot of my guests had the name but spared them. So you're just willing to rip the band-aid off, open up that wound and dump a
That's
bunch of
right.
salt in. I like it. So anybody who crosses JB, I'm just warning you in the industry.
I'm gonna let you know on Greg's
saying,
podcast.
Don't do it. my guest lineup for the next 3 months just dwindled. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. That's well done. Question number 2. I'm hesitant. For those of you who are listening on audio only, please hop over to the YouTube channel and check out the answer to this one, because this one I have to ask it because I ask everybody all 3 questions. Yeah. Question number 2: if you could change one thing about your smile, what would it be?
Ooh. I know nobody agrees with this, but I would love for my teeth to all be flat. Nobody loves that smile, but I've gone through ortho twice. I have an ortho consult that I have not gone to yet here in San Diego, but I would flatten all my teeth. I want them all one length.
Okay, I don't use this word often, but everybody hates you that is looking at this on YouTube right now. Okay, I've just said it. I've said it out loud. I'm just saying. Anybody who's going to see... I'm leaving that one alone. Greg's bitter. Question number 3. If you could go back and be the inventor of any dental product, and no, you can't choose your own if you have something you've invented, any dental product, which one would you choose and why?
I probably would want a blend too. I'm a big chapstick person, but I love the Listerine and any other type of mouth refresher, like little things that you put on your tongue and it dissolves. I don't know who's listening to this, but somebody needs to be as an inventor or an innovator, inventor, and give us some credits. I think we need some type of moisturizing chapstick that we put on. We always lick our lips, right? What if we lick our lips and it freshens our breath and kills some bacteria at the same time? Like, who's making that next? That's what I want.
Ooh, so rather a look back. He's doing a face forward. All right, I like it. So those Listerine strips. So I did clear aligners for, I think it was like 23 trays in the top, 17 on the bottom, and the refinement was another 14 and 11. So I got used to those Listerine strips. I still to this day I use them. So yeah, there you go. Listerine,
I love them.
Little plug for you there. Yeah, there you go. Still love them.
Sponsor us. Sponsor the podcast.
Right, I know, right? There's something to that. that was not a product plug, by the way, for all you listening in. That was not an intentional product plug. I actually do use Listerine strips. All right, JB, last few minutes. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with my listening audience today?
Yes, I would actually. Well, I'm just so thankful and grateful for our friendship and having the opportunity to hop on here. And thank you for giving me some time to share a little bit about me and having such a fun, engaging conversation. It's the art of listening and conversing. In addition to that, I'd have to say, there's so much change happening within dentistry. And I think there is so much fear still present because you see somebody doing something and they might have an idea similar to yours. Go for it is my thought around it. I feel like there is so much opportunity in dentistry and healthcare as a whole that if your commitment is to helping people, get out there and help the people. Stop worrying about what somebody else is doing. If it looks like you, sounds like you, feels like you, it's not you. Only you can make the difference that you're looking to make. So that'd be my message of motivation on this wonderful Monday that we're having today.
I love it. It's a little modification on your mama saying don't do business with dirty shoe people. It's like go for it, and that's from JB. So thank you, Jonathan Bonanno, for being on the Two Sleuth podcast. It has been my pleasure.